and thank you to the conveners for the invitation to come and speak to you today about the findings from the cash cow project. Before I go through the major findings from the project, I just want to acknowledge the quite remarkable research team that I'm speaking on behalf of today. Picture of them here, and together with this remarkable group of people here, the cash cow producers and the cattle veterinarians that service these properties, we have conducted what I believe is quite a remarkable project in Northern Australia. And it certainly would not have been possible without the incredible collaboration between the research team and this group of people here. So I'd just simply like to thank all of them for their tremendous cooperation, and many of them are in the audience here today. So, the cash cow project set out or was designed to answer two simple questions. Firstly, why do some cows readily get in calf after calving and others take much longer? Why do some pregnant females subsequently calve and rear their calf and others do not? To answer those questions, we enrolled 160 management groups or breeding mobs located on 72 properties, and you can see, located across Northern Australia in all of the major beef breeding regions. And the approach that we took was to divide the regions according to country type, and country type being the potential productivity of the land. So there were 4 country types: the Southern Forest, this region here; the Central Forest, this region here; the Northern Downs, which extended from the Barkly down into the Channel Country; and then the Northern Forest, which is this region here, extending right across. We monitored the performance of 78,000 breeding females over 3 to 4 years. The approach that we took was to use crush-side electronic data capture. So all of the enrolled females in the project were NLIS tagged. Using the system operated by Outcross, the BeefLink system, we were able to capture 12 to 20 pieces of data for each animal, including important data such as their lactation status, their body condition score, their pregnancy status, age, and so on. A critical part of the electronic data capture was ensuring that we would not adversely impact on the rate of processing of females as part of the normal musters on these properties. And the graph here shows that we were able to capture the required information at processing rates similar to those that are normally achieved at the annual weaning muster and pregnancy test muster. One important point that I'd just like to highlight that we did identify as part of the project is we had an opportunity to assess the rate of NLIS tag loss, and we did that by determining how many tags needed to be replaced. And approximately 8% of tags were lost over a 3.5-year period. And I believe it is, as far as routine adoption of electronic data capture to monitor breeding cow performances, we need to come up with significant improvements in the NLS technology to particularly address this issue of loss of tags. So a more permanent system is most definitely required. Critical question that producers need to know is how much beef is my breeding herd producing per year? For example, if I retain 500 cows at the end of the annual preg test muster, how much beef can I potentially sell 12 months later? And how much does it cost me to produce that beef? We came up with, in the Cash Cow project, with a range of different approaches to estimate beef production from breeding herds. One of the easier measures to calculate, which is highly correlated to annual net beef production, is the measure Wiener production. And Wiener production is simply calculated on the basis of the annual total number of calves weaned multiplied by the average weaner weight divided by the number of cows retained. So in actual fact, all that's required is a set of scales and a tally book to determine this measure. Now, on the right-hand side here, this funny-looking graph, which is what we call a box and whisker plot, all right? And on the y-axis here, we have each of the country types. And this is how we have expressed the performance, the production and performance of the cash cow mobs. So the middle bar here, this bar here, is the performance of the middle herd. So the median performance, the 50th percentile. And this outside line is the 75th percentile. So when we have a look at the southern forest, we can see that the median performance, as far as weaner production is concerned, is about 150 kgs. Similar with the central forest, a little bit lower with the northern downs. When we come to the northern forest, it's just under 100 kgs. So for the first time, we're able to look at beef production across the different country types from breeding herds and get some feel for the variation. And this value here is what we consider is an achievable level of performance. So we can now do beef production Napland style, all right? So how is your herd performing? So here we've got the northern forest box and whisker plot, and we've got a series of breeding mobs and their performance plotted here, all right? And one of the important things this shows is the importance of measuring this over at least 2 years, but preferably something like 6 years, because look at the variation. This is the performance in 2009 for one mob, performance in 2010, all right? And this is almost certainly due to this calve every second year phenomena that is very common in our northern herds. But what it does demonstrate is that we can now effectively benchmark performances. And as I say, this line here, the 75th percentile, represents what is commercially achievable, because all the work that we did was on commercial beef breeding properties in Northern Australia. What was very interesting was we surveyed the cash cow producers and asked them what was their average annual steer growth. And we found that there was a strong correlation between annual steer growth and weaner production. In other words, if the annual steer growth in our country is 110 kgs per year, then weaner production That's what we should expect from our breeding herds. So it gives us a measure, all right, or a way of predicting what level of performance we should be achieving from something that we should certainly have a pretty good handle on. Now, an important part of the project was coming up with a set of measures to define the reproductive performance of breeding mobs, of management groups. And we only had data from 2 musters, all right? So we had data from the preg test muster, where we fetal aged. We had a weaning muster, subsequently, weaning branding muster, where we estimated lactation status, and then we had a subsequent pregnancy test muster. Using our fetal ageing from those 2 successive preg test musters, we were able to estimate month of calving and also month of reconception. So it demonstrates how we can quite powerfully use fetal ageing as a means of accurately defining the efficiency with which cows reconceive, and also then to enable estimation of losses from pregnancy testing to weaning. The measures that we ultimately came up with were the percentage of lactating cows pregnant within 4 months of calving, annual pregnancy rate, percentage fetal calf loss, and the incidence of missingness, which was in fact effectively our incidence of mortality. Now, there's been substantial debate about our decision to select this measure, percentage of cows pregnant within 4 months of calving. This graph here shows the intercalving intervals for different mating systems that were utilised in the cash cow project. So we have got less than or equal to 3 months, 4 to 7 months joining periods, a continuous mating segregated system, and a continuous mating system without segregation. What was important, as far as we were concerned, was to be able to identify this group of cows, all right? Because this group of cows are the group of cows that are going to wean a calf in consecutive years. And when we looked at some beef CRC data, it demonstrated that those cows that calved in the same 3-month window in consecutive years, the percentage of cows conceived within 2, 3 or 4 months was 17%, 64% and 90%. Therefore, the best measure of the proportion of lactating cows that are going to wean a calf in consecutive years is percentage pregnant within 4 months of calving. And that also takes into account the inevitable inaccuracy in fetal ageing, which unfortunately is not consistently in one direction. Now, this is from the paper, and I'm just highlighting that you can see considerable variation according to country type, and this last figure here is the 75th percentile, which is our achievable level of performance. Whereas with the calf loss, it is this figure here, which is the achievable level of performance. So, we, as part of the project, gathered information to enable us to investigate the impact of some 83 different factors affecting the performance of these breeding mobs. These included nutritional factors, environmental factors, property management factors, cow factors, and infectious disease factors. What we firstly did was we investigated each of those factors individually, investigated the impact on, for example, percent pregnant within 4 months of each of those 83 factors. We then identified those that had a significant impact, and from that group of factors, we then constructed our models. All right? And these multi-level models were constructed to enable us to identify which group of factors were having the greatest impact on that particular measure of performance. It's important when you look at the data I'm about to present is that the differences that we present are absolute percentage differences. In other words, where we talk about a 5% difference, the difference between 50% and 55%, we're talking about 5 percentage points difference. So I'm going to just go through the factors affecting two measures. Major factors affecting percentage of lactating cows pregnant within 4 months of calving. Country type had a big effect, as you can see there. So when we took all other factors in the model into account, so the effects of age, body condition score, all the other factors that I'm about to present to you, when we took all those into account and looked at just country type, the effect of country type per se, then what we were able to demonstrate is the performance in the southern forest was 12% higher than central forest, 23% higher than the northern downs, and 59% higher in the northern forest. All right? That's specifically the effect of country type. As expected, parity had a big effect. All right? The well-known impact of first lactation cows, 13 to 16% lower than performance of mature and aged cows, supporting that recommendation of, wherever possible, managing replacement heifers separately until they calve for the second time. Average wet season protein status, measured as the ratio of crude protein to dry matter digestibility using data derived from fecal NIRS. When this ratio was less than 0.125, performance was 7.5% lower. So what this is now providing us with is two things. One, it's identifying what are the major factors, and two, it's defining how big is the impact of that particular factor. And so this finding shows potentially the response to best practice grazing management, such as wet season spelling, for example. Now I'm going to show you some specific figures on some of the major factors affecting percentage pregnant within 4 months. And the first one is period of calving. And there's a huge difference between the performance of cows that calved in the July-September period to the proportion that calved in the December-January period. 49% difference. And this was across all country types, all right? So this effect that you're seeing here is independent of country type. And we have looked separately at this issue in the southern forest, and we've demonstrated the same effect, all right? So this now is telling us that there are real advantages to manipulating when our cows are calving with respect to the likelihood of them reconceiving. And there probably are no surprises in this finding, given that really what it's talking about is matching nutritional requirements to the critical stages of the reproductive cycle. The effect of body condition score at the time of pregnancy diagnosis prior to calving. And this effectively is the piece of work that truths the cash cow findings. You've got to remember, we monitored 78,000 cows. We used outcross data collectors, some 30 outcross data collectors, and Northern Territory Department of Resources data collectors. Across the 72 properties, so you've got multiple people making these measurements, all right? And here is a perfect biological response, all right? Cows in poor body condition, 18% lower percent pregnant within 4 months of calving than those in good condition. However, when we looked at this by country type, we found that the impact, that is the difference between poor and good condition, was much lower in the northern forest. Now, why is that so? Well, the most likely is that cows in the northern forest are much more likely to lose significant condition following the preg test muster. So, in other words, the ability to predict performance is going to be less using this measure in the northern forest. But the effect was still there. And that highlights, that finding highlights the importance of making decisions on weaning based on cow condition, because to increase body condition score from 2 to 3, all right, cow needs to gain 60 kgs. So we need to ensure that we provide the cow with the opportunity to gain that condition rather than trying to do it at times of the year when it's going to cost a lot of money in supplement. We also demonstrated here the effect of change in condition between the pregnancy test muster and the first annual weaning or branding muster. So cows that that gained condition versus those that maintained or lost condition, there was an 8% lower percentage pregnant within 4 months. Effect of wet season phosphorus status. All right? In the cash cow project, our measure of the risk of phosphorus deficiency adversely affecting performance was the fecal P to metabolisable energy ratio. Right? And that is how we've looked at it. When we inspected the data, the cut point was 500. We've subsequently broken that up into more categories, and I can tell you today that the threshold values that are provided in the P manual, which is 420 to 460 for a 400 kilo cow, fit perfectly with our threshold value. In other words, we found no difference in performance of cows in the 420 to 500 range versus the greater than 500 range. It was, in fact, less than 420 where we saw the effect. So our findings are quite consistent with those described in the P manual. But rather than looking at this as a measure of whether I should feed phosphorus or not feed phosphorus, it is a measure of the risk of P deficiency adversely affecting performance, and we then have to look at how we then control that risk, which will include, which may include feeding a phosphorus supplement. But the important thing is that the impact was greatest in our first lactation females. So the red line is FP to ME greater than 500. The green line is FP to ME less than or equal to 500, and you can see that the primary effect is on the first lactation females. This is absolutely consistent with all the published research that has been done in Northern Australia of the impacts of P deficiency. It is those young animals, and particularly the first lactation females, that are at greatest risk of P deficiency adversely affecting performance. We also demonstrated that hip height was an important factor. We showed that the shorter cows, so less than 125 centimetres, their performance was 3 to 5% greater than the taller cows. Now, I'm not going to have time to go through the factors affecting calf loss, all right? They're listed here: country type, reproductive history, whether the cow lactated the year before or not. So if they didn't lactate the year before, 4% higher loss. Lactation number, the effect of first lactation versus later lactations. Low protein status during the dry season. I'll just show you this one, which I think is very interesting because it shows the impact of management. And it's particularly in these first lactation cows. Mustering around the time of when cows are predicted to be calving, not surprisingly, increased calf loss. All right? But it just demonstrates the importance of using tools like fetal ageing to predict when cows are likely to be calving and hence to then schedule your weaning rounds appropriately. So the rest is presented in the paper for you to read, all right, including the impacts of infectious disease. I think I'll just pull up here and take questions.
I think that's a good idea.
Thank you very much.